everyone, and welcome back to our course. In the previous lecture, we learned how to create a table via Python and SQLite queries. And we created that table in our database. In this lecture, we're going to learn how to add entries to that table. So let's get started back in our Colab project. Here I'm going to take the query variable and give it a new value. I'm going to write a new query, which should be inside of our triple quotation marks. And those are single quotation marks. Here I'm going to create a new query. All right, so I'm going to use insert instead of create. And I'm going to insert into the pet table. So here by convention we use capital letters for SQL, but it's not required to use all caps. But we're inserting into the pet table. Next up, we can pass in which of our attributes we want to set for the pet, because we don't have to set all of the attributes in this case. So we can then pass in, inside of parentheses, the names of the attributes we want to set. Let's say we wanted to set the ID and the name. Well, then we pass in those two attributes into the parentheses. After that, we then call values. And here into values, we are going to pass in the values for each of those attributes that we specified, such as the ID, which can be 1, and then the name, which can be Muffin for the pet. All right, and feel free to split this into here separate lines. Okay, and so there we go. That is our next query. We're inserting into our pet table. We're going to be inserting attributes ID and name, and the values are 1 and Muffin for ID and name in order. This will create a new row in the pet table. To execute the query, we have to call our cursor and grab execute, the execute function, and pass in our query variable. All right, so we have executed 2 queries so far. How do we actually check that we were able to create the Muffin row? Well, let's go ahead and first commit our connection. So I'm going to grab our connection to SQLite and use the function commit. This is going to execute our queries and commit them to this SQLite database. So we're specifying onto which of our databases we want to commit. All right, so make sure you run that code cell. Then we can execute a query to check that we have actually inserted a pet into our pet table. So I'm going to create another query here. This time, instead of using insert or create, I'm going to use select. Note here, you can use a single quote for your query. You don't have to use the triple quotes, but just make sure that your query fits on one line then. If you need a query that is multi-line, use the triple quotes. Here I'm going to select star or asterisk, and this means that I am going to be selecting all of the rows or entries. Then I have to pass in from which of my tables I want to select, and I'm going to select from the pet table. This SQLite query will return for me all of my pets. And you can also make this a multi-line query just by adding these triple quotes. Then you can separate out your query here onto multiple lines. Okay. So here we're selecting from pet. Let's run that query here. Now this just creates the variable. Remember, we have to call cursor.execute to actually execute the query. So that is going to perform this query. But how do we get the query's results? How do we get all of the rows from the pet table? For that, we are going to use cursor and use the function fetch all. So this is going to give me the results of my latest query. And we can store the results in a variable called result. Okay, so we can run this code cell. Then we can take a result and inspect its value. And look at this, we have 1, muffin, none, none. So this tells me that I was able to get the ID and the name of muffin. Then we got none, none because we did not give muffin a gender or a date of birth. All right, so we just have their ID and their name. We can also format this result by wrapping the result in a print function. This will format it for printing. So if you run that cell here, you get the same result. But if you had a really messy result, then it would be cleaned up a little bit, especially with line breaks or hidden characters. All right, so we were able to successfully verify that our pet table indeed has muffin. Let's go ahead and create some more pets. So we just have to follow the same exact logic for building out a query. So join me coming up in our next lecture. We're going to add more pets to our pet table.